Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's three prakim Rambam, Hilchos Shabbos, Perek Chav Dalid, Chav Hey, and Chavav, beginning with Perek Arba V'Esrim. We're starting with the 24th chapter. We're going to be learning about things that are prohibited because of Chavay Shabbos, as we will explain. And this will also bring us into the introduction to the rabbinic prohibition known as Muktzah, or being metaltel b'Shabbos, as we shall see. This chapter has 13 halachas, beginning with halacha Aleph, says that Rambam. Yesh devarim shehei masurim b'Shabbos. There are various activities that are forbidden to be done on Shabbos. Af al pi she'einam doimim l'melacha, even though they do not resemble the forbidden labors of Shabbos. And also, even though they do not lead to the performance of these malachas. In other words, the above two are the reasons for the rabbinic prohibitions that are called shvus. What we are learning now are other prohibitions that don't fall into the category of shvus. Now, before we say what they are, if we don't have these two reasons, indeed, why will they become prohibited? So here the Rambam quotes the pasuk in Yeshayahu, Bishum shenemar im toshiv mishabes raglech, that it says that if you shall restrain your feet of asois chafotzecha b'yom kachi, of pursuing your desires on my holy day. Why? Because of the Shabbos day. And what should we do? It says in Amavichi that we shall honor Shabbos by refraining from the following, as we said, from attending your wants, following your ordinary ways, from refraining from speaking about your mundane matters. So therefore, let's follow through the things that it says in the pasuk. Person is forbidden to tend to his, let's say, mundane activities on Shabbos. Not only may you not do them, you may not even speak about them. You're going, for example, a person should not speak with his partner. What should they sell tomorrow on Sunday? Or what they should buy? Or how should they go about building this house? With what merchandise should they go to another location? Because it says, in other words, we should restrain from speaking about our mundane matters. Dibur asur, however, hirur mutar, lahoyer ba'ayin mamish, at the end of Kontres Achrim. What's at the end? What we learned on Chai Kislev. And the Alter Rebbe actually concludes speaking about this exalted level of keeping Shabbos. Really, people that are in a higher madrega al pi Kabbalah should also refrain from thinking about mundane matters, but al pi nigla, and where most people are at, the isur is about speaking, va'ayin sham, the inner meaning of speaking versus thinking. Halacha base. Asur la'adam lifkoid ganoisav usadoisav v'Shabbos. It's forbidden for a person to check his gardens, his fields on Shabbos. Why would he check them? Kidei liris mahem tzarichem, to see what they require, or heich ein peidaseyim, or how is it growing? In other words, in other words, we're supposed to refrain Yakir from pursuing our desires. Well, that's exactly what this is. Person is not allowed to go to Shabbos, not going beyond the Tchum, but going until the boundary of the Tchum. Why would one go there? In order to wait there until it gets dark, to be nearer the matters that he has to attend to. And by the way, we're going to limit this prohibition in a moment, because then it comes out that he walked on Shabbos in order to pursue his own desires. Says the Rambam, it's not always awesome. That Yutaka went until the boundary of the Tchum, in order to do something after Shabbos that you cannot do on Shabbos. A person wants to harvest their produce. They're not doing it on Shabbos, God forbid. They're not going beyond the Tchum, but they want to be closer to getting to the location where they're going to do harvesting, which is something they can't do on Shabbos. That is something that one, from the pasuk in Yeshayahu, should refrain from doing. But if a person is walking on Shabbos until the boundary of the Tchum, and they're going to wait there until it gets dark. But in order to do something that they are allowed to do on Shabbos, it's not such a gavaldik thing, but that's already mutter. For example, if your goal is to bring Peiris Mechobarim, it's called harvesting, or to hire workers. Hiring workers is asur. If you remember midrabanan, because you might write that you can't do. And as we'll see in a moment, to guard, I'm allowed to guard. I'm not going anywhere. I can sit in my house the way I'm sitting anyways, and I can look out on my orchard, and I can make sure that no ganav comes in there. I'm allowed to do that. We'll see. I'm doing my affairs. The Rambam will explain why that's not a problem. So if I'm going to do something that I'm allowed to do on Shabbos, I'm allowed to walk until that location. Exactly. Very good. Or hold on, how can you bring a behema? Because a behema, even though the behema is chutz l'tchum, it's not problematic. Peiris telushin. How can you say you can take peiris telushin? One is not allowed to carry on Shabbos. So it's not that you're going to do something that you are b'poil allowed to do. You're going to do something that theoretically you can do. If the peiris are telushin, what would be the issue? Carrying. If there would have been mechitzas in that location, then you would be allowed to carry, even though there are no mechitzas. Because ilo ha'isha mechitzas ha'yamutal b'Shabbos. Listen, lekrach ploini ani hoylech l'macher. I'm going to be going. You're speaking about going to a certain location. It says v'daber davar, which means to refrain, because going to that city, the poil might be awesome, but theoretically might have been mutter. Because ilo ha'isham burganim are certain huts. Remember the dinim. In other words, if you have within every ibur, you have another such hut, then you can take a go. But you know what? The person cannot say, just for example, I'm going to take my car to go there. I'm going to be riding there because that's something that's inherently usr. That's always usr. That's the line. Halacha dal. A person can allude to a worker by saying, Haniram shetamoid imi la'erev. He says, stand near me in the evening. In other words, he's implying that at the evening I have work for you. Let's see if you can be there by the evening. In other words, that's already speaking cryptically. But you cannot tell him clearly, Hayei nachan li la'erev. Even though, again, he's not saying, I'm going to hire you, but that's already too direct. Another behavior, just going back to the beginning of this chapter, that doesn't fall the category of shvus. Shvus, just to know, is the category yakir of something that's doimel malacha or something that's maybe l'dei malacha. When either of the two are the reasons for a rabbinic prohibition, we will call that shvus. Everything we're learning now is not connected to that. It's connected to the pasuk in Yeshaya. And that is, v'asur lorutz. A person cannot run. A person cannot jump on Shabbos. Shenemar ma'asois dirachecha. Which means, shelo yehi yiluchach shel Shabbos kiluchach shel chol. And we're going to have exceptions in a moment. That's the rule. But on the other hand, let's say a person is thirsty, and you know where the water is? In the bottom of the boir, or the shiach on the ma'ara. And going to get the water demands a lot of exertion, even if it's 100 amas deep, that you are allowed to do. Even if going down is not so pashut, you have to be metapes v'yoyed v'shois or metapes v'oilo, which means it's very steep. You have to go down, you have to use your hands and your feet. That you're allowed to do. You're going to drink. No, you can't say that you can't do any type of exertion. But generally, running and jumping, that's not the way you walk on Shabbos. Another din. The word is laharbis. You cannot speak extensively. What's meant this? Epis, this gefährlich. God forbid, not to learn it in a cynical way. Just a lahoy, laharbis. Now goes exceptions. Person can run to advar mitzvah. Some people, they run every day. And God bless them. It's very healthy to do exercise. The Rambam says so. They can run to shul. There you go. Isaac is here there right now. and you go, and you can go a little bit of a roundabout way to shul, maybe. I don't know. It says you can run to shul, to the Beis HaKnesses, to run to the Beis HaMedrash. Another, you can make calculations in your mind and talk about them. You can actually even measure. That was the whole thing. That's the story at the end of Masechta Shabbos, where there was a rabbi, whoever was taking a bath, they were counting the tiles. But that was tam. It wasn't the Medida Shal Mitzvah. Medida Shal Mitzvah, you can take a measure. You go in mikvah, later in yesh kashir, or you beged to know if it was Makabal Tuma. You can also make pledges. You can gather in large areas, even to Tartiya Ois, Uteraklan Shal Kutim, even in these theaters and other such large rows of Goyim. On Shabbos, if it is Lifakeach al Iskei Rabim b'Shabbos, it's if it is to take care of matters of public interest. So if there's a meeting about the homeless, give you a mashal, that's when they're meeting. Go there on Shabbos. It's not called the Dabadavra. It's not the Burim Shel Choyel. It's Tzarchei Rabim. Tzarchei Rabim doesn't have to mean a mitzvah. Tzarchei Rabim is needed. Another thing, Umeshatchen ala Tenoikes la'aris, that you can speak about arranging a marriage for a Tenoikes. You see, we're calling them a Tenoikes. Or Tinik, L'lamdei Sefer, L'lamdei Umanos, which is another thing. And the Lamdei Umnos, in other words, learning for a profession is a great mitzvah. And by the way, that's taka the halacha. Remember over here, some people a couple of years ago they had certain they were trying to get a degree in something, and they had to show up someplace on Shabbos. They didn't have to write; they needed to be there. They go there. That's the din. Now, there's a detail. When you're mevakar choyle and bikur choylem, when do they have bikur choylem? At the end of Vilchos Avel, the last chapter, included in Avei L'Yacha Kamoicha. And the Rambam wrote over there that the main thing is to give a bracha when you go to the Chayla. So here, there is a detail of how you have to change the nusach of the bracha. You have to say Shabbos Imalizak, that it's Shabbos, and therefore we have to refrain from crying out. But therefore, the refuah will come without us crying out. That's the original nisht of Shabbos Geret. You have to know where to apply it. Another thing, this concept of going as far as you could, because there's going to be tonight, let's say Shabbos is out at 8 o'clock. At 8:30, there's going to be a meeting in the other village. They didn't have cars then. So you can walk until the Tchum to be nearby in order after Shabbos for you to be able to go all the way there because of the mitzvah. You can tell a colleague, Lech lamakom ploini. Lo matzasa sham, chavi lamakom ploini. Lo matzasa b'mane, chavi b'masayim. These are things you can do if it's connected to a mitzvah. The only thing is, you can never mention a specific maximum that you're willing to pay. That's a limit. Okay. And that's the pshat on Pasuk Yeshayahu, where the Torah says, Asois chafotzecha. In other words, we have to refrain from pursuing your chafotzecha. Chafotzecha asurim. Cheftzei shamayim, which includes tzorchei rabim, mutarim. Halacha vav. Umafligen by Yamagadol by Shabbos l'var mitzvah. You can set it on a ship, even on Erev Shabbos, only if you're going for a mitzvah. What's normally the halacha is that you should only go before 3 days before Shabbos. There's a machlokes what that means. Why is that? Because it takes a few days for the body to become habituated to a ship. And if you're going to be on the ship, you're not going to be seasick on Shabbos. But if you're going to Dvar Mitzvah, you're going to the Holy Land, you can set out a ship on Friday. But there are many malachas that are done on a ship which may not be done for you, Amir La'akum. So if the majority of the people are goyim, you don't have a problem, but you have to tell the captain, as far as I'm concerned, I don't need to go on Shabbos. We can pull over in the island on Shabbos. Even though you know that he's not going to be shoivus. Just adding another nuance that if the majority of the people on the ship are Yidden, that's a real problem. Because B'poyel, The goyim that are driving the ship are being mechalal Shabbos for you, and there's no way to go on a ship without chilul Shabbos. But if you are the minority, as long as you made it clear that for your needs, can take another day without going on Shabbos, then you're good. Another din, mefidin nadanim Shabbos, hafaras nadanim is done by a father or a husband. Bein l'tzoyrech Shabbos, bein shaloi l'tzoyrech Shabbos, and the nesha'olam l'chacham ala nadanim shein l'tzoyrech Shabbos, and hataras nadanim, which is done by a beis din shalad yotis or by yachid mumcha, by anyone, that can only be done if there's a tzorech Shabbos. And even if there was time to be matzah the neder before Shabbos, because all of that falls into the category of a mitzvah. Halacha zayin, ein oinshin b'Shabbos, you don't punish on Shabbos, afa pishu oinish mitzvah sasei, ein odeich Shabbos. What are we talking about? Keitzad, areishin is chayva beis and malkos and bisam, ein malkin oisoi, the ein mamisan oisam b'Shabbos. Like you have Ori Miklat, Shabbos is a Zman Miklat. Shneimar, Lo yisivaru eish b'chol moish v'seichem hayom HaShabbos. What does that mean? That's a warning for a bezin that they should not burn someone who's chayiv sreifa, but it's only an example. From there we learned, V'adin, l'shar onashim. Halacha 8, Muter lo'adam lishmer pirois b'Shabbos. A person is allowed to guard his stuff, as long as they're not walking, right? That's the hiluchach. But bein telushim bein mechubarim, that's a chiddush. Because by walking, I can only go to walk peidos that are telushim. But if I'm not going anywhere, even though they are mechubarim, what are you doing if someone is coming to steal them? Whether it's a behema, whether a person like a behema, a person like a chaya, people are coming to ganavim. Goyer bahem, umaka bahem, umarchikon. So why is it mutter? Says the Rambam. To buy something, to speak about buying something that I don't yet own is prohibited. To do something that's going to bring me an extra schar, I'm going to make profit. All of that is prohibited. Meaning, I just want to retain what I have. No one says you can't lock your door Friday night. Are you doing something to prevent ganavim? Yeah, you can guard that which is already yours. Halacha 9. Is a person who's protecting his grain from the birds, or you're protecting your cucumbers and your squash from chayes. So how would you do it? Don't clap your hands, don't dance. Why? Because the other common way of you protecting it would be by you taking a pebble and you throwing it. You might end up throwing your dal damas with a shusarabim. So you have to find other means. Make a shinoi, yakir, and when you make a shinoi, I think you're going to be reminded that you can't throw something. Gewaldig. Make a chayes. Shout. That's what you should do. Like the Rambam wrote before. Goyer bahem or maka bahem. Goyer or maka. It's good enough. Beat them. That's good. Don't dance. Okay. Halacha yud. Kol advarim sheim asurim mishum shvus. And now we're going back to what we learned in the previous chapters. Loi gazeru aleim ben hashmashas. It's a big klal. The prohibition midrabanan is only ba'atzmi shel yoim hu sheim asurim. Avo ben hashmashas mutarim. Even though we said so many times, ben hashmashas is safek yom, safek layla. Doesn't matter. We're speaking about something that's really not asur midoraisa. The chachamim only made it asur when it's vadei layla. However, when can you do a ben hashmashas? Either it's connected because of a mitzvah, or it's a doichak. It's considered for you a pressing matter. What's pshat? Keitzad mutalei ben hashmashas la'alas be'ilan. You are allowed to go up a tree. Going up a tree is a shus, right? You might break off a branch. Or you lost it al panei hamayim. Swimming is prohibited shvus because you might build a raft. When ben hashmashas. See, ben hashmashas ledvar mitzvah. Chen moedet min ha'ilim or moetzi min hakarmelas eruv sha'asa. Why? Because that's called a doichak. Because if you won't do it, then you won't have an eruv. Chen moedet min echbats. Anything. You didn't do it because you were busy. Mutter. Then it's already us. Therefore, Ein ma'asrem mesavade ben hashmoshes. We don't do that. Afal pi she'isur afroshos ha'maisa b'Shabbos v'Shvus, avo ma'asrem es hadamai. Interestingly, I just want to say like this, that the reason why you're allowed to do demai is because it's considered a lesser of a prohibition. No, it's the same thing. It's not called a doichak. You could have done it before. If we're speaking about someone who has food besides this, do it after Shabbos. Since bechlal demai is midrabanan, so it's not considered something so severe to begin with. Here they allowed it. Bein hashmoshes. Halacha yudal. Katan she'asa b'Shabbos davar shum shvus. For example, talash ma'atzit she'einoi nakuf. Atzut nakuf yakir is considered mechubar lakarka. But if it's einoi nakuf, or he was metaltal b'karmelis. So these are very big statements in the Rambam, and there are many contradictions. We'll call this bekitzah. Ein beis din mitzuvah la'afrishoy. Guys, ein beis din mitzuvah la'afrishoy is very different whether the father is mitzuvah la'afrishoy. V'chein im henichoy aviv. In other words, the father really should have stopped him. You know why? Because of chinuch. But if the father didn't stop him, then ein memachin biyadoim. In other words, le Rambam, Beis Din is never obligated to stop a child from doing something that's awesome, even if it's awesome midorais. The child's father is obligated to educate him. However, Yakir, if the father is not educating him, when is Beis Din obligated, listen to this, to rebuke the father? Only when the father did not stop at doiraisa. If the father didn't stop at the Rabbanon, even though the father should have, the Beis Din doesn't have to rebuke the father. Halacha Yud Beis. That's the Rambam. It's big statements. Now, let me just add another nuance. This is when it's shayich the chinuch. Sometimes the child is so young, he's not higia legil chinuch for this activity, then there's no chinuch over here. And here, biyodayim, he can't do it. That's another din. We spoke about, can a parent bring a child to the switch on Shabbos? That the father cannot do. But if the child is opening and closing the switch, even if it's a doiraisa, let's go electricity is a doiraisa. If the child is not higil legil chinuch, a 2-year-old, he doesn't understand, then even the father, there's no chinuch involved here. We're speaking about the child higil legil chinuch. The father should be mechanech. If the father is not doing what the father should be doing, Beis Din should only harass the father, inspire the father when it's a doirais. Halacha Yud Beis. Now, guys, we are beginning the big topic, and this is going to be the topic, my friends, of Perek Chav Hei and Perek Chavav. Muktzah, huge. The intro is in this chapter. Why is the intro in this chapter? Because, like we mentioned, the Rambam gave the 2 general reasons for Shavusim is something that we discussed already. We are now bringing in new derabbanans that are not similar to any other Shavus. And actually, when it comes to Muktzah, as we'll see over here, the Rambam is going to give 4 reasons why the Chachamim decreed that certain things may not be moved on Shabbos, what we call Isur Muktzah. So this is beyond the normal Shavuos, and it's like a category for itself. So it belongs in this chapter. So we had a pasuk Yeshaya, the Kabbalah, and now we're having Muktzah. Also, Chachamim l'taltel mixas devarim b'Shabbos, the way you move them b'chayil. Before going into exactly what can you not move, and the Rambam is being maramas that Muktzah with the shinui will be mutter. You can't be metaltel it the way Pnei ma nogo be'isur zeh. Reason number one, Amru mo im hiziru neviim. Now another link to this chapter. Vitzivu shelo yehei hiluchach b'Shabbos ki luchach b'chayil. Even walking cannot be the same, which is why if there isn't a mitzvah reason, can't even jump and run. You have to walk ruyig. As it says, v'daber davar. So we're making a kal v'chomer from divrei neviim, from divrei Kabbalah. Kal v'chomer shelo yeh tiltable Shabbos ke tiltable chol. That's first of all, pasha. Number 2, also, for the person not to have an experience of Shabbos like it's a mundane day. Well, how will that be? That if the person of the Yavi like Bia Lasakin, Kalam Ipina Lapina, Mebais Labais, Oilatsni Avan Vachayotsu Mahem, and why would a person even do it? The Rambam says, I'll tell you why a person we'll do it, because most people have freed up time on Shabbos before they get married. As you'll see when you get married, who has time for that? But in a Shaykh, theoretically, Sharehu Batal the Yoshev V'Beisai. And the Yevakish Davar Shisasi boy. Most people, healthy people, they can't sit idle. So if there wouldn't be a muktzah issue, you're going to end up doing a lot of schlepping work on Shabbos, and then the nimtza shalei Shabbos. Ubatal hatam she'ema batoida l'man yanuach. And don't make no mistake, even though we always learned that Pichasidis, the whole idea that we are resting from creating because God stopped creating, and creating by God is the Lamates Malachis, l'man yanuach kepshutai, and this gives people more rest. And Halacha Yud Gimel will give another 2 reasons, Yakir. So we have 2 reasons. We had a Kal V'Chaimer from Divrei Nevi'im. We had the concept of Pasha to rest. Halacha Yud Gimel V'Oid, that Kishi Yavakir V'Taltal Kevim Shamlachim L'Isr. As we're going to learn in the next chapter, we're going to divide Muktzah into many subcategories. One of them will be some restrictions, not all, some restriction on moving an item that was made to do something that you cannot do on Shabbos. Like if you have a saw, l'mashal, that's not very expensive, right? It's not muktzah machmas chesed kis, as we'll see in the next chapter. So if you will be able to move it with any restriction, you might end up using it. And now the final reason, some people are not working people. It's called here in LA Trust Fund Baby. Like the Tayalim, tourists, the Yoshev Koronos, people who sit in the corners. The Rambam is actually adding a reason even for the pasuk in Yeshaya. Then nimtza shalei Shabbos shvisan hanikeres, not laman yanuach. That's something else. Laman yanuach means you should rest. Here, there's another issue. They want for the behavior to be different. Whatever they do during the week, if that's the same Shabbos, then how did you do Shabbos? You're not going to experience Shabbos, and therefore, shvisa midvarim elu hi shvisa shavu l'chaladim. This makes sure that everyone's behavior will be modified on Shabbos. This is the above 4 reasons. Nagu be'isur atiltul, va'asru shalei yitaltul adam b'Shabbos elo hakelim, as we'll define, and not only kelim, but there has to be atzarich lehem. There has to be a need. Stam to move things is not going to be allowed, with the exception of. What do you mean? Does not do with Eruv. No, of course, can't carry it. So it's in the house, Lipina Lipina. Or if you made an Eruv Chatzedes, Mibayis Labayis. And Kamoy Yishayis Bar. So that was a Gavaldika Hagdama with the Rambam's reasons for why Chachamim make Muktzah. And that will segue straight into today's 2nd chapter. We're starting, my friends, Perek Chamisha V'Esrim, Perek Chafei. Perek Chafei is already a nice, long chapter. Right? No longer 13 halachas. We're still at Hilchos Shabbos. It's not the end of the world, but it's Gavaldik, guys. It's 26 halachas Shem Havaya. We're going to learn in this chapter the foundational rules of Tiltul Chafetzim, otherwise known as Isur Muktzah, beginning with halacha Aleph, Klei Shemalach Delahet. So, Koydem called to say the following: that for something to be called a keli in the context of muktzah, the word keli won't necessarily be the same as the meaning of the word keli in many other areas of halacha. Keli means something that was made for a purpose. And it's hard, like for example, money is not a keli. That's something that I always didn't fully chap. It means you have to know how to be magdid keli for muktzah. But there will be a huge difference whether something is not b'toiras keli. There'll be greater restrictions versus if something is a keli, but we have to define: is it a keli shemalach leheter, a keli shemalach leisur? Keli shemalach leheter means that the primary purpose for what they made this keli for is something for which you can do on Shabbos. I'll give you an example. A chair was made to be sat upon. That's called a keli. And in other areas of Allah, it's called furniture. Here it's going to be called a keli. You can sit on Shabbos. So it was mamash made for Shabbos. It doesn't mean it was made only for Shabbos. It was made for Shabbos. It was made for Shabbos. It was made to sit. It was made to sit. You can sit on Shabbos. Keli shemalachta le'isur will be a keli, a pen. It was made to write. It was not made for Shabbos. But if that item is not very expensive, which means that the owner doesn't mind at times to use it for other purposes, and the other purposes could be done on Shabbos, nishkeferlich. What do I mean by nishkeferlich? When you're moving something, in halacha, we're going to give 3 reasons why you're moving something. You're moving it l'tzoydach gufay. L'tzoydach gufay means you don't want it to get ruined. You don't want to use it. Either ganovim might come, you're moving it, it should not get stolen, or because it's in the sun, the heat will ruin it, or it's in the cold, or it's raining, it's going to get wet. That's called moving something for itself, not to use it. Then you have tzodach gufay. Tzodach, that's 1 second. Moving it for itself is called tzodach atzmai. For itself. Tzodach gufay means I want to use it. Whether I'm using it for its primary purpose, whether I'm using it for a secondary purpose, I'm moving it to use it. Tzodach mekoymai means I don't want to move it. I don't want to move it for itself. I don't want to move it to use it. I need its place. So when we speak about tiltul, as we'll see in a moment, we'll see like what will be the difference between a keli shemalachta leheta to a keli shemalachta leisur. It's going to be in these details. Something that is malachta leisur will have less reasons why you will be allowed to move it. You will still be allowed to move it, but more restricted. Keli shemalachta leheta, you can move. So let's begin. Keli shemalachta leheta, v'hu hakeli shemutalas by b'Shabbos, davar shenas by b'choil. Whatever its primary purpose is for, like sitting, you can sit in the Shabbos the way you sit in the weekday, or kois lishtos boy, ka'ara lechel boy, sakin lachtich by basar bapas. A cordoness, a hatchet, leftoya by a hatchet means it was made for this purpose. Not made for building, and you can use it also. That's something else that we'll learn. That's called the kelish malachta leisur. Whether you can use it to crack a walnut. A cordoness is something that was made to open up nuts, a nut cracker. That's one category. Halacha base. The yesh kelish malachta leisur. The reason or the primary reason for what this keli was made for may not be done on Shabbos, like a grinder, like a rachayim, like a mill. Okay, now, let's bring this to Mutz. Halacha gimel. Kol klisha malachta leheter. Bein hoyashol eitz. Doesn't matter what the material is from. Whether it's made out of cheres, Yakir Yerin thought why, oishal even, oishal mateches, muter litaltal b'Shabbos, for all of the 3 reasons we mentioned before, bein b'shvil atzmoi shel keli. Tzorech atzmi means, like we mentioned, you have this plate, and the plate is in a location where someone might steal it. You're not moving it to use it, you're moving it to protect it. Bein l'tzorech mekoymoi, you need a place. Tzorech gufa means you want to use it. There is the broadest permit. Just to know, to move it stam, shaloi l'tzorech klal is not allowed. That was the last words of the last chapter. Kelem atzorech lahem. But v'chol kelem shalach le'isir. Again, I don't care what the material is made out of from. Bein hoyashol eitz, oishal cheres, oishal avanim shal mateches. Here also, you can't say that a kedesh malachta you can't move. You could, but you have to have it's for less reasons. There are more restrictions. Mutal taltal b'Shabbos for what? Tzorech gufay, tzorech mekoymei. That's allowed. Now people are going to jump. Tzorech gufay. You're telling me a keli shemalachta leisur means a keli that was made to do something that you cannot do on Shabbos. You can't move it tzorech gufay for that purpose. Of course not. But if you're going to use it for another purpose that could be done on Shabbos, then you could move it. Certainly, that will be the big difference, whether it's keli shemalachta leheter, keli shemalachta leisur, or my nafkamina, could you be metaltal it, l'tzoydach atzmoi? Keli shemalachta leheter, yeah. Malachta leisur, nish. Halacha, dalit, ketzah. Metaltal u'asakar shol eitz. Lechol ba tzorech gufay. I'm using it. Leishev mekoymei, my friends, means tzorech mekoymei. And now, oikedei shaleti ganev, which is called tzorech atzmai, v'zo b'shvil atzmam. That's because it's a plate. It's keli shemalachta leheter. Chaynim tiltal oisim in achamom. You want to take it out of the sun. Kadei shaloi tisyabesh v'tishaver. It's going to become saturated with water. It's going to deteriorate. Furthermore, now we're moving on to a kelish malachta leiser, just applying it. You have a grinder, you have a mill. And I'm right, you can move it. That's what's tzedek gufay, not God forbid to grind. It means l'shabar oleh agoizim or la'alos oleh lemito. I want to get to my bed, so I need a step. I'm using it. That's called tzedek gufay. V'zeu tzedek gufay, which is a gufay that you can do on Shabbos, or you want its place. Tzedek mekaymer. Aval, since it's made primarily for something that may not be done on Shabbos, you cannot even taltal it. You cannot move it. Kedei shaloi tishaver, v'lo kedei shaloi tiganev. V'chein chocha yoytze bozeh. That's gevaldik. So now we had the first two categories of muksa, keli, malachta leheter, malachta leis. Now we're going to go into the Rambam's third category. And that is something that's not a keli, something that's not an keli. And I want you to know that we're going to have, again, there's nuance. There'll be a lot more clarity in the next chapter about this. But let's see what's not a keli. Avonim. Avonim is easy because avonim, anything that is in its natural state, even though God made it for a reason, in this context of Hilchos Shabbos Muktzah, keli means we made it for a purpose. And another detail, when something is in its natural state, but there was designation by machshava, we'll see soon. Sometimes that will be enough. Sometimes, like by Avanim, even if I designated a specific rock to be my door stopper, I have to do something that's the altar. I have to do something on the rock, even something minimal, not something that now I can use it. I can already use it. I make a scratch on it. I do a maisa begufay, which will make it into a keli. But stama rock is not a keli. Now, ma'ois is something that I always struggle with. I still need some more enlightenment because I'll tell you, ma'ois was made. I understand that we may not use ma'ois, but something being made for a purpose that cannot be done on Shabbos normally is called a keli, shemalachta le'isr. And even if you would never use it for any other thing, say that, then you call that chesra and kiss. We'll have that category soon. Malachta le'isr, chesra and kiss is more problematic, but that's not money. Money is even worse. It's not even a keli. Now, kanim, reeds, and beams, v'chayoytze bahem. Yeah, beams. They were made for construction. Also, l'taltalon. Now, even gedoyla koyde gedoylam, afa pishin it tells us yadam, they could become a keli, as we'll see. In other words, it's not about the weight. If it became toidas keli oleo, then you can be metaltal. Like I gave you an example. If you have a stone, and the stone is being designated for it to be used like a doorstop. You have a very big door, or many people are coming to learn, and that even is a great bench for the outside chair. Once halachically it's considered a bench, even though you need 10 people to carry it, then you can move it. Okay. Dal sabayis. And there's a big difference whether it's a door of a house versus a door of a box. A door of a house, afal pi shehein kelim, lo yuchnu letaltel. And therefore, im nisparku afilu b'Shabbos ein metaltal in oisay. A lot more about this in a moment. Don't worry, there'll be a lot about doors. This chapter is gavaldik. It's like wow. Chein ha'afar, natural sand, v'hachoil, earth and sand, and a corpse. He puts them all together. You know why? Because the corpse comes from the earth and the sand. May not be moved on Shabbos. And a sub detail, ben shmeinachai, if a child was underdeveloped, means he did not gestate for the 9 months, halachically he has a din of an Evan, and it's also to be metaltal, the baby, even though he's living, as we see, right? So the mother has to lean over to feed the baby. We'll get to that in more details. I just want to point out that when it comes to the isur of muksa, just a general statement, you know what I may not do to muksa? First of all, I can touch muksa yakir. Second of all, moving muksa, shaloi kedarkoi, generally will always be permitted lechatchila. Just give an example. People walk on the beach on Shabbos. Sand is muksa. Sand in a sandbox is not muksa because sand in a sandbox was sand that was taken before Shabbos, put in a location for children to play with. But sand on the natural place is like it's worse. There's no Torah scaling. Doesn't matter. When I'm walking on the beach, my kavana is not to move it, even though it's psikresha, and I'm not moving it in a normal way. That's not a problem. Okay. Halacha zay. Mutter l'taltel hakli afilu shloi l'tzoyrech tashmishay. Elo lasis by melacha shloi nasis l'tashmisha, for example. Noitel adam kurnis, a hammer. A hammer, my friends, is made for construction. We're going back now. This is a keli shemalach le'isem. I can do it l'fsobayagoizim to crack nuts. Kurdam lachlich by devela. A hatchet. I can use it to cut dried figs. I can take a saw to cut cheese. Cheese is a funny thing. Cheese, all hard cheeses, even the fake hard cheeses today, many of them, when they're exposed to air, they become hard. The fact that our cheeses are exposed to air and they don't get hard is a raya that they're not even cheese. It's not all fake. I remember those cheeses, and you need a saw. So you can take a saw for construction to cut the cheese. That's what you need. And you can take a rake. A rake is mama. We're talking about things that are made for building, for landscaping, and you could collect dried figs. A winnowing shovel, a pitchfork to feed a child. Have that picture in your head. A child with a big mouth. A weaver's, a spindle or a weaver shuttle, to pierce a fruit. Machat shel sakoyin, a sack maker's needle, liftoich by asadelos, to pick a lock, as a machteshes, a millstone to sit upon, v'chein kol kayotze b'zeh. Okay. Halacha 8. If you have a sewing needle that's not broken. See, we're going to learn about broken utensils in a moment. Many times a broken utensil loses its Torah scaling. Once something lost its Torah scaling, it's the worst muksa. But if it's complete, you can use it to take out a splinter. Now it's important to note that there are others who hold that removing a splinter is awesome. Clearly, the Rambam holds it's permitted. There's nothing to talk about. The chiddush he's saying is that if you have a needle, even though a needle was made for sewing is something that's awesome midoiraisa, one of the lamates malachas. That's the whole word. So it's like keli shemalachta leisa, ein boy chesron kis, which means the owner doesn't care if it's used for something else. And taka l'tzoyrech gufa is mutter, l'tzoyrech atzma is awesome, but that's called l'tzoyrech gufa. But if it broke either edge, either side, now a metaltalin oisam. Why? Because it lost its Torah scaling. It's made for sewing. If it's not usable for sewing, it's not a keli. If it's not a keli, you cannot use it. Now, sometimes they make needles. We'll see details. By the needle that Rambam holds, that if it was made for sewing and it broke, it's not good. If it was made and not yet finalized, in other words, you have a needle, it's called a pin, and they didn't make the opening, the eye. They didn't yet make it. The Rambam holds it's already called a keli, because many people would leave those needles the way they are. Then mutal taltala, that's a very important role. No, since some people leave it in the state, today it's more common. In the times of Chazal is because of this. People wanted to have a keli to take out thorns, a keli to take out splinters. It's very cheap, a little piece of metal. They would leave it. Today it's even more used. Halacha 9. Pins. You buy a shirt. I don't know how no one ever got poked. There's 18 pins in the shirt when it's new. Halacha 9. Kol kli shemak with all of shema yivchasu damav. Now, if you have a keli, but not only that, the owner who doesn't want for you to use it for anything other than the primary purpose, like kelim hamuktzim l'schoira, anything that you plan to sell, you don't want people to touch schoira that you plan to sell because it's going to get devalued, or any expensive keli. Shemak b'daleim, that if people are going to handle it for other reasons, shema yifast, it might get ruined. Then also l'taltalim b'Shabbos. And that's the category that's called muksa machmas chesrin kis. What will be the examples that Rambam gives? Hamasar got a large saw, the yosei shel machrisha, a part of the plow, right? The knife-like point of a plow. The sakan shel tabachin, a butcher's knife. The cherev shel ush kafim, a leather worker's knife. The chitzin hecharashim, a carpenter's plane. The kordon shel psamim, a perfumer maker's border. Yeah, of course. By the way, some of them is not so much because it's expensive, like the perfumer. It's dumb. If you use it for anything else, some other thing will go in there. It's going to ruin all the perfume you're going to make. So remember that. Now, halacha yud. Another category. It's called muktzah machmas isur. Not keli shemalachta leisur. Don't confuse that. It became muktzah machmas isur, and that's even according to Rab Shimon, which is, for example, neir shedliko by b'Shabbos. When Shabbos came in bein hashmoshes, this is Rabbi Yehuda. Kivin shuksel bein hashmoshes huksel l'chol Shabbos kula. You have a lamp that's lit with oil. No, it's the lamp became muktzah, the oil is muktzah when Shabbos came in. Because when the fire was lit, you're not allowed to move it. You're going to move it, you might put out the fire. And even the menorah shoyan that olel. And even the shulchan shoymois. That's called the buses. Mo'ois yakir is something that's not even a Torah scale. Something that's a buses also becomes muktzah. So these items were muktzah when Shabbos came in. The vart is, even though now the candle went out, even though now the money is not there, they continuously remain muktzah. That's called muktzah machmas isur. Why? The rule is even though isur. However, but if the reason why you were not allowed to move it, it's not because it was asur, but because it was disgusting, like for it was repulsive, like Ner Yashin Shal Neft. And b'chlal, these kerosene lamps, they were earthenware and they got like burnt and soot, the black soot. Or v'kilei hatsoya, all kalim that were used then for human waste, v'chayoytze bahen. Here there's actually a leniency, and that's going to be called in a moment, graf shal re'i. Muter letaltel in the Shabbos and mutzrach lahem. Oh, it's a big difference. Muktzah machmas isur is really problematic. Muktzah machmas miyus, if you need them, you can move them. Halacha yud beis. Kol hakelim anatolim Shabbos, if during Shabbos it became dismembered, like the door came off. Kegoin dal shida teva migdal. And again, bein shenisparko b'Shabbos, bein shenisparko koydem haShabbos. Koydem haShabbos is even better. Chiddush is even on Shabbos. Another thing just to remember, guys, if you remember, the Rambam paskins like Rab Shimon concerning Noilad, which is big. The Rambam paskins that we're not concerned with Noilad on Shabbos. So the issue is only if it came apart, is it a keli or is it not a keli? So in these examples, you see clearly, we just learned about the door of a home is much different than Rambam, because a door that was made to be hung on a house was never meant to be moved. Moving meaning, of course, it goes open and closed, but it's affixed in its place. These are parts of kalim that could be moved. So even though it's now not the box, it's just the door of the box, you continue to be allowed to move it. Any kalim that was allowed to be moved on Shabbos, that's the key. No, it came from a kalim that you can move on Shabbos. That now broke, not only if it broke before Shabbos, but even if it broke on Shabbos, the broken parts can still be moved. And what did you say before, Yaakov? These words. As long as the part of the keli can be used for a semblance, not exact, for something similar. He gives an example. You have a shivrei areva, you have this trough, and now it broke, even on Shabbos. So what was it made for? It was made to store food related. Now you can take one part and you can cover a chavius. That's in other words, that's still called me'ein malachtim. Shivrei zechochis. What are you going to use it for? Yeah, lachas is ben piapach. But he says if something broke, even though it came from a keli that you could have moved on Shabbos, but it's so broken that they're not roy to do l'malachet klal, it's also letaltel. Why also letaltel? It's very important, not because it's noilad, because it's not a keli. the keli was designated to be moved. This is not a keli. Halacha Yud Gimel. Kol kisuya kelim nitalim b'Shabbos. For who sheyesh toidas keli aleihen. That's going to be very important. We'll see in a moment. Hoya klei mechuber lekarka. Kigoin chavias hatmuna ba'aretz. So here, there's another nuance. Im yesh bakisu shelo beis achiza. Beis achiza means that when you looked at the cover, don't forget, guys, the barrel is in the ground. If the cover has a handle, when you look at it, what do you see? You see that this was made to function as a cover. That's good. But if you can't, it's not nikar. That's the word. Lo nikar, that it was made for a kisoy v'imlav, a metaltal in oisoy. Because it was made for something that's not moved at all. Potholes, covers. They go down the street now. You have all these covers. What are they? I forgot what they called. In the streets, they're metal.
Manhole.
Shkoyach. Only if they have a beis achiza. Now, these manholes have a beis achiza. The beis achiza is, you have these two holes in them. You see that this is not part of the asphalt, not because it looks different, because you see that there's an option of removing it. That changes it all. It's more designated for a cover. Kisoy tanur is different. Everyone notices that the kisoy of the tanur is made to be a cover. So there, even though it doesn't have a beis achiza mutal taf, like this is about it being nikar. It has to be visually discernible. That's a cover. Even if it's for something that's mechubar, it will still be okay. If nikar, halacha yudal, shnei devarim, echad asal l'taltal, echad musal l'taltal. Now let's get into real fun. So now that the Rambam laid out the Rambam's general categories, so we had kelish malachta leheter, kelish malachta leisur, yakir, something that doesn't have a toida skeli. Then we had muksa machmas isur, muksa machmas mius. And then we had muksa machmas chesron and kiss. I think that's the categories that the Rambam did. Now, what happens if you have two things that are together? They're smuchim zelazeh, one is on top of the other, in a way that when you move one, you're going to move the other. So like this. If your need is for that which you can move it. The other thing will be moved with it, doesn't matter. But if what you need is l'taltal asa, it's your intent. Lo yitaltenu, you can't say, you know what, I'm going to move the davar hamuter. I'm going to move the davar hamuter, and everything will be okay. What will be an exception? We'll see soon. I don't know if it's in this chapter, in the next chapter. The Maisa was Shlomo HaMelech. He asked when David HaMelech passed away. David HaMelech passed away outdoors, and he was in the sun. He wanted to know whether you can move him. So there they put a kicker or a tinuk on him, and then they moved him. No, it's really, you were moving it for the corpse. But you had two things together. That was a kavod abrius. That's the exception. The rule is, what do you really want to move? If you want to move the davar hamuter, you can move them both. No, you're moving them both together. They're together. If you want to move the davar also, then you can't. And he gives examples. Kate said, for example, Hagam, fig, it was buried in straw. Now, guys, you know what straw was used for then? Straw was used for construction. Giving you an example of something that's used for construction is something okay, cannot be moved. Or a charara cake that's still on the gecholim. I don't know. We have this in the Mishnayos. Some cookies they would bake by putting the dough on top of the coal, and now they're stuck together. Toy chavan bakush oy bakirkar. What can you do? You can pierce them with the spindle. You can pierce them with the weeder shovel, and you can take them. You can get them out. You kidding? If I have this pago, if I'm going to take the fig, I'm going to be moving the straw. So what? Because I want the fig. Now, another example, turnips or radishes that are buried ba'afar. Here there's another nuance that what? Umixas ha'olin migulin. Some of their leaves are protruding from the ground. Why is that important? Guys, remember this from the Gemara, because if none of it is protruding from the ground, you know what it will appear like. It's going to appear that you made a hole in the ground. That's another problem. We're not talking about muksa. We're talking about making a charitz in the ground is a what? A tolda of chayrish or boina. That's another problem. So if you don't have that problem, the problem is only that earth is muksa. The worst muksa. It's not keli.
That's an example of nikr, right?
Move the lefis, even though I'm going to be moving the ground because that's the rule. That's the rule that we're learning. However, not a mace. So Evan or Koida, the Rambam says, Evan or Koida is not a keli, high level of muksa. And I have a kikkar or a tinuk. Lo yitaltel ha'evan or Koida ba kikkar, oy ba tinuk sheyesh aleha. So if I want the beam, even though you can say, well, I'm also moving the tinuk, can't move it. You can't even move the child with the Evan. We'll see that in a moment. Okay. Now, there's an exception to this already. What will be the exception? Let's go back to the child. If a child is holding on to something that's muktzah, and there are times they have to give that intro to the next halacha that the child wants his father to hold him, and there are times that it's important. At times, you have to hold the child. There'll be more matir. Even though v'ho'even biyodoi, avoloi dinar at kedei kach. Wow. Why is money? The child has gagoyim. Because since the money is chashuv, there's another fear that if the dinner is going to fall down, the father will pick it up. The child has gagoyim, let him have gagoyim. That's it. Now another thing, you have a basket. The basket was perforated, and the chacham fixed the hole by putting in a stone. Here, you know why you are allowed to move it? Because at that point, if the stone was placed in the hole, the stone is not a stone anymore. You know what the stone is? The stone is basket. You change the stone. Another case, you have a basket full with produce. So here, what the issue is again, you want the paytas. What did we learn before? We learned that if I want the davar hamuter, I can also be metal the davar ha'asur. But you have to know another layer. If it's a type of paytas that if I were to turn the kalkala upside down and everything were to fall on the ground, the paytas will not get ruined, then do that. And then put the paytas back in the basket and you don't have to deal with the muksa. But if it's a type of produce that it's soft, and if you're going to turn it upside down, it's going to get ruined, then your taka can carry both. If the fruit is soft, like an oven vitusim, grapes and berries, then you can take it the way it is. I gave an option of turning it, and by the way, ma'amer, just to know, people say, how can you gather fruit? Right? Ma'amer is only b'makom geduloi. If I have in my dining room table the apple basket, I have apples or oranges, and they all spill out, I gather them. Not a problem. So why can't you do it? She'im yinaira peidas, you turn for buffer, they're going to get soil. And therefore, when Markem Efsed like Gazru, Halacha Yud Zayin, Chavis Shachach Evan Al Piyah, and you need the wine, not you need the place. We're speaking about you because if you need the place, you'll move everything. It's not a problem. Mat Al Sida, you can't touch the Evan directly, but indirectly, Tiltul Kala Achayad, Vienoi fellas, Hoisa Beina Chavis Evan Oleo, and there's no physical room to tilt it. So then move it until you leave the neighboring barrels. The moment you are able to tilt it on the side, the Evan fellas, and then you're good to go, and then you can get the wine. And that's if you forgot money on top of your card and you need the car, gavaldik, but you need a pillow, you need a blanket. That's called moving it. That's gewaldig. Why don't you have to mean? Because over here, Yakir, again, you have a mixture of something that you could move, something that you can't move. You're moving the davar hamutar together with the davar os. If you purposefully place the money there, if you purposefully place the evan on the chavis, so now we view the chavis as a basis the davar ha'asur. So now I want you to know that other Rishonim make a differentiation. See, when you put money on a blanket, in your mind, the blanket was like the platform for the money. The blanket was serving the money. When you place a stone on top of the barrel, the stone is serving the barrel, not the barrel, the stone. The Rambam doesn't make that difference. Since both of them were a buses, bein hashmashos, before your point, yeah. If you place the money there on purpose, yes, it does. No, we don't say that. Now, just add the words bein hashmashos, and then I'm already paskin, and this is like Rabbi Yehuda. That when something is muksa bein hashmashos, it becomes muksa for the entire Shabbos. Because the Rambam, just to know, the Rambam goes back and forth between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. You don't always paskin like one or always paskin like the other. Halacha yudches. Ha'even sheba kiruya, stone that's placed in a earthenware bucket. Very simple. We're not used to getting water from a well, but you know what the challenge with getting water from a well is? That sometimes you get the bucket down into the hole, and you know what? The bucket, Yakir, doesn't go into the water. So what they did was they put weights in the bucket. It should go down, but now there's a stone in there. If it was placed or fixed in the bucket in a way where it's taka fixed in there, then it's not a problem. It's like we learned before, there was a stone in the walls of a basket. It's not a stone. It becomes the basket. This becomes now the bucket. It's like part of the bucket. But if the stone is separate, then why? Because the bucket is a basis to a stone. Another din, you have a reed. Now you have a reed. If the reed was altered, begashmias, to serve as a hanger, it has a din of a keli. The Rambam when the Rambam gave examples of things that are not even keli, he gave a reed, a natural reed. So here it's interesting. I am taking my shirt off the reed. That's not a problem. I'm not moving the muksa. You couldn't show him to him halacha yutes. Peidish also lecho, for example, fruits that were not tied. You cannot tie that on Shabbos, even though it's only midrabanan. And even if the produce is only to begin with chayva ma'aser midrayim, oy ma'aser dishon shalom trumasay, oy truma tameya, and the guy's truma tameya could be used, but you know for what? For fuel. You can't burn on Shabbos. It means it's not to be used on Shabbos. Oy ma'aser sheni v'egdish shlo nitul chasan, even though it's food, since you may not consume it, asal taltalon. However, the mai hoyel v'roilaniyim chein ma'aser sheni v'egdish, that when the owner redeems it, the owner has to add a chaimish, even though he didn't yet do that. Afal pishon asan a chaimish mutal taltalon. Allah chaf taltal yisrael atruma. Another din. What happens if there's food? The food is good for a kohen, not for a yisrael. We don't say, only a kohen can move it. No, even a yisrael can move it. You know why? Because it's roy for someone else. Another din. If they're both in one keli, obviously, let's go back to what the Rambam says. If they're in one keli, but you can turn it over and then take out the oichel from the psoilas, do that. But if you can't, you can't separate them. Oy, Peres, I'm a stand from a karka. Oh, the Rambam. She'im yinari yifastu. Avalam hoya goyzim shkenim reitzah behem. You know what? If everything is in nuts, shake out the keli. Now everything will be on the ground. You can't take what you can't take. Soilus from oichel, you can't. But the oichel from the psoilus, you could. However, if you need the makam akeli, I don't care now. Bein shatoyda l'mayla, bein lamata metaltal hakoil ki echad. That's called moving two things together. There's no problem at all. Moving something that ain't all of Teiras Kela l'tzoyrech mekoymai. The Rambam says you cannot. But here it's together. That's why you could. If you have a row of stones that were not cemented in their place, I want to say that's very important. If you have stones that were cemented in their place, I'm allowed to touch muksa. I can use muksa. The issur is only to be metaltal muksa. The problem of sitting on the nidbach shalavanim is because they're not cemented in their place, and my sitting will move them. That's the issue. So if shechishav alam yoim, that's key. If you prepare them. I want to say very important. The word chishev means you prepared them not only b'machshava. You did something on them. You made episode, even a scratch, to show, to express your intent of sitting on them. Im limdum, that's pshat preparing. Very important. Limdum means you did a maisa on them. Mutar leishav aleim lamachar vim lav. Then there's ein lo teraskeli. Also, another category here. It's even more lenient. Charuya shaldekel, branches of a date palm. Now, what are they normally used for? They're used for fuel. Shigadorim le'etzim, tenim lachaleim erev Shabbos. You decided just through machshava to sit on them. Here, mutar l'taltalon. That's very important. I want you to know like this. What did we learn in the Gemara? Branches are used commonly to be sat upon. That's why, even though you originally designated it for fuel, you can change its designation only through machshava. Masha'inking stones that are not designated at all, there only machshava is not enough. There you have to do a maisa. Or if you bepoil sat on them, not you intended, you sat on them. Again, you didn't change them, but through your action before Shabbos, you're saying, I know it's for fuel, but until I burn it, I'm going to sit on it. Halacha chabeis. Akasha lamit. Get out of it. Very nice. Akasha lamito, straw that's on the bed. Lo yidna aneu biyadoi. Because in the times of Chazal, straw was mainly used, yakir, either for building, I'm telling you, or for firewood. Interesting. Why am I saying this? Because in the times already of the Poiskim, straw was primarily used for animal fodder, for animal food, and animal food is not muksa for animals. In other words, even though it's on the bed, don't shake it off with your hand, push it. No, it's not your mattress. What's the straw? I'm saying the straw is the items that are used for construction. It's used for fuel. You can't take it off. Only kelachayad minanei begufay. But if it's Michael Behema, that's remember anything that's Michael Behema is allowed to be used. And another thing, I think the word here is also that you put it on your bed, which means you intended to use it for, I think like the Rambam Paskins, that most like an Evan, just intention is not enough. That's the issue. No. It will be enough. It's if you made it into your bed. If you made it into your bed, what do I mean? I placed the sheet on top of it. That means it's a mattress. Then, like we learned before of the Charoy Shaldekel, then it's not a problem. We said before, Afar is something in the category no Torah scale. But if you gathered, offered into your house, I know I gave an example of a sandbox. They didn't have sandboxes for kids. You know why people would bring sand into the house? Because the earthen floors were made out of sand. And therefore, whenever a person, let's say, spit up something, the way they would deal with hygiene is they would cover it with earth. So im yichad l'keren zavos made of Shabbos, v'tal talei b'Shabbos voice like all tzarachav. If you built it into your floor, you were not miyachid keren. Then it remains offer. But as long as you put it in a corner to be used, Rambam is giving examples where you don't have to make a shinoi bigufoy. Placing it in a location, that makes it into a kelim. Halacha Chav Gimel. Now comes another din, a new din, my friends. I cannot cause for something that prior to Shabbos had a shame keli olav. I cannot cause it on Shabbos for it to become mutz. Asur levatel keli mechanoi, because it's like demolishing. For example, and guys, we just had this in Perikei. That lo yiten keli tachas aner b'Shabbos chal Hashem hanoitei, because you're making it now a basis of davar hamutz. Shashem and Shemin Nerosel Taltaloy, as we mentioned, and even after the Neir goes out, since it was Muksa Ben Hashmashes, it remained Muksa the whole Shabbos. And if it's going to fall into the Keli, now the Keli will become a basis from Muksa. And therefore, because the Rambam holds that this Beitzah is not allowed to be moved. All right. The Kabbalah Beitzasa. Koifa you could, because if I don't want for the egg to be trampled upon and to be stolen by an animal. So there, when I put the keli over it, I can take it off. It's not a base for it. Under it means that if the chicken will give off an egg, the keli will have the egg in it. It's going to be holding it. Then it's a base. That's also because then I'm being mavatal keli mechana. That would be koifa. No, that would be nesina. Correct. Koifa means turning it upside down. Turning it upside down means it's not in it. Avol koifa keli oleho. The chen koifa keli al kol davar shos l'taltalei, because if it's just turned on it, sharei loy bit loy shem yachbet sitlanu. Oh, it's getting late. Halacha avdal noistan klei tachas adelev. So if you have dripping water, like the roof is leaking, you can take a keli, because in other words, we're not speaking about, there's no prohibition of carrying rainwater. Okay, that's very important. It's not muksa, it's not an issue. But the water has to be usable for something. Whereas if the water is disgusting, then it becomes muksa. Then you're being mavatal the kela bichani ein a noisnin. Ve'im nasan. There's another thing. If the water is disgusting, Yakid, there's another heter. Anything that's considered a pile of re'i for oinik Shabbos, Chazal allow you to move out. So here, even though you shouldn't have done it, if you did it, then you can take it out. Why? Why? Because it's disgusting. So now I have a kasha. If I'm allowed to use it, why can't I lechatchila put the bucket? Because there's another rule. She'ein oisem graf shel re'i lechatchila. Halacha chav. Hey, chav yishol tevel shenishbera. Tevel is muktzah. Maybe kelim and yachtachteho. How are you being mavatal kelim meichanik? Tevel is muktzah. Hoyel, if you will violate the rabbinic law and you'll be masakin it, it will then become a sukan. Harehu kem a sukan for this halach. It's like double rabbinic laws. The noisling kli tachas anel kabel netzoitzes. We also had this in Perikei. Netzoitzes mipnei she'ein b'mamish umutal taltal keli. Another law, guys. Kodesh and ishbera. If a beam breaks, you're talking about the house beam. Ein soim chanol of the sasal of berichas hamit. You cannot support it with a bench or a bedpost. Because I'm picking up a bench, you understand? I don't want my roof to come in. Can't do that. Ella imkein hoya revuchim v'chozman sheyach b'tzit lein kedei shleyevatel kele meichanoi. Very interesting. Okay. In other words, I'm speaking up not how practically. If the bench that I used on Shabbos to support the kleit of the house will get stuck into the ground, I will not be able to remove it begashmias. If I cannot remove it, then I took a keli, a bench, and I made it into the house. That's also called being mavatal keli meichad, which you may not do. How great is that? I'm allowed to spread a mat over stones or on top of a bee. In other words, like koifa. Koifa means I'm not making it into, I'm not being mavatal. But then there's another issue. How can I spread it on top of the beehive? I'm tzad. It's psikresha. Remember that sugya. If it doesn't go into tzeda, you can do it. So this concept of koifin will always be mutter. Also, with koifin as a sal b'Shabbos, I can turn over a sal in front of the chicklets in order for them to jump up and down. A living animal, is muktzah on Shabbos. So when the Efroyach will jump on my bucket, jump into his little house, at that moment the bucket will be muktzah. But it wasn't there bein hashmoshes. So even though when the chicklet is on it, it will be muktzah, but when he's not planning to live there, he's going further. When he gets off it, it's vaited okay. The final halacha, halacha chavav in this chapter. What's the issue over here? Like we just mentioned, animals are muktzah. Animals don't have a toira scali. Animals are muktzah, but the animal isn't tsar there. So if the first thing is it can't eat, if you can bring parnasa, you can bring food to its place, befanas and oisa in the hole, and then take it out Matzah Shabbos. But the imlav, if it doesn't work, so you bring karamu kusasa so maniach tachtel. What's the issue, Yakir? The issue is that if the animal will use the pillows and the cushions to get out, again, it's not that they'll become muktzah. When the animal is on it, they are muktzah. But then it will be okay. Anything that's not a boxes, bein hashmoshes, but 1 second, they're going to get soiled. It's like the bench. But poyel mamish, you won't be able to use it. Put an animal in a hole together with your chamoy. After the chamoy goes on it, go what? You're going to cover yourself with it. You could do it because of tzar balachayim. Them also, you're being mevatel kelim yechani. I'm talking pashut about they're going to get dirty, they're going to get wet. I'm talking about practical reasons because of tzar balachayim goes in the bottom. However, v'asul lahaloisan biyadoi. Gavaldik. Tzar balachayim. Here you see that even when it comes to muktzah, an animal that doesn't have a toira scale is a higher level of muktzah to which tzar balachayim won't override. But making something levatel kelim mechana is lesser muktzah, lesser problem. It's not even muktzah. And here tzar balachayim will trump it. Different levels of rabbinics. You can't move them physically, but you can push them. They're very little. They need to be helped to walk along that. You could do. Why? If you can be medaded means to walk when these animals are very little, like by a baby. Also medaded by a kid. You have two parents holding the hands. So if you are allowed to be medaded, why is the tanagoylas different? The tanagoylas is different because they jump out of your hand. You're holding on to some of it, and when they jump out of you, when they push away, you're going to pluck out a feather. That's already an issue. But you can push them. Pushing. Okay. Today's final chapter is going to be more about items that cannot be moved on Shabbos. Perek Shisha Esna 23 halachas, and the Oibusur will help us finish this on time. We took too much time in the previous chapter. We're going to start putting on our jogging shoes. Halacha Aleph says that Rambam. We needed to wake up earlier. Kol klei ha'oireg v'chavolim v'chavolav shekarim shaloim. All utensils used for weaving, including the cords, including the reeds, are allowed to be moved. Why? Because I can shalach le'isa. Guys, don't forget, what did we learn? You can move them l'tzoyrech gufay and mekoymay, not l'tzoyrech atzmay. Chutz mikoy v'rel mekoy v'rataftin. Aside of the upper weaver beam and the lower weaver's beam. Why? Because since they are unmovable, so then even if you want to rip them out, or that you can't move. The pillars of the loom, because when when you remove them, they have little indentations in the ground, and you might end up filling them up. Ushar klei ha'oidik mutarim. Halacha beis. Machabdei shel tamara, brooms made out of date branches and the like that they are used to sweep the ground. They're not that they're kelish malach leheter. Because guys, mutar lachabed b'Shabbos. Now we had this in Perek Chaf Aleph. Now, of course, if you have a non-paved floor, not nowadays in the city, how can you can't? That's something else. You're going to be mashvagumais. But the avoida of sweeping inherently is mutar on Shabbos. Yeah. I'm saying then no, it's a chiddush because then most floors were not paved, and the non-paved floors you cannot sweep. But the act of sweeping is mutar, so it's called the kiddush malach leheter. You can even move it outside the chatzim. Bricks that remain after the building was completed are considered kiddush malach leheter. Why? Because they are regularly loose to lean on. They were something was done to them. They're filed. Well, we learned in the previous chapter that something that's not a keli, if you designate it by an action, they are actually made to be leaned upon. But the moment they were piled, because the guy wants to use it for the next building site, a small charred, broken piece of earthenware. Why? Because it's fit to cover a utensil. Guys, 1 second, Yakir. We're talking about the Toich Daladamas. Clay cotton, even though in the Rishus Harabim there isn't a clay cotton. It's not inherently something that's awesome. It's considered a keli, shemalach de leheter. The gufas chaviyashen nis chatisom. No. Megufas chavis means a stopper of a barrel. A stopper of a barrel that broke. The barrel itself was shuvara. What did we learn in the previous chapter? That Rambam says that any keli, even though it breaks, you can still use its shuvara. Me'ein melachta remains mutter. But the im zarkal asham v'edyoyim, which you showed through this action that you're not using it. Now what does it become, Yakir? It becomes something that she'ein lo shem keli. It's not a keli. Also l'taltalo. Klisha nisroya. In other words, it wasn't shattered into pieces. It broke, Yakir, but it's not shattered. You don't break it. Halacha daled. Now, stones are muksa. Ein olav tleilas keli. For covered abrias, you can take into any beis hakisei shalosh avanim mikurzolis. Avanim mikurzolis were some sort of rounded stones. They were rounded and sharp. In other words, they were stones that were very usable for toilet paper of the time. Bigger than that, it's very hard to use. Aval, another thing they used for toilet paper was adama, clouds of earth. Aval adama, if it's karoivali hisparech, then you can't move it. Because people will not use it. Another thing about stones, what's the chiddush over here? Do you remember the whole concept of tircha yisera? We don't have any issue of tircha yisera when it is l'tzoyrech chavad abriyos. Yodalem kshav v'nishtako betit. If it rained on these stones and they sunk into the mud, im reshumam nikar. If you still know exactly where they are, then you are allowed to remove it. Mutal taltel. Very good. Even sheish olav tinuf. If there's already tinuf on it, it's recycled. So shavada lekanechi for sure mutal taltel, even if it's very big. Even if it's very big. Even though the Rambam said before only kamaloi yad. If it was taka used before, then you can still use it again. It's not that healthy, but I'm saying what we're doing. Halacha hey, what they did then. Now, all of these hatadim was because that was the toilet paper. What happens if there are two options? You have a stone and you have a shard of earthenware. Which one is safer? The stone. So only move the stone. Why? Because the shard can cut a person in that area. Then you'll bleed out. Which means it's rounded, it's not sharp, then that's even better than a stone. If it's soft grass, then mekanech with the grass. Timlav use the tzroid because sharp grass can cut you. Okay. If you have remnants of mats that became worn out, they remain a keli shulachta leheter because people use them lechasba yatinif, which is great. So you can move them even let's say the chatzba. Avol shiara begadim shavola, but if you have garments that are worn out and they don't even have shloisha, so you won't even use them for a patch. Now they lose their toidas keli. Also letaltalam she'enu uyim loilanim v'loilashim. Shivre yatanur mut letaltalam b'harei yenkachol kelam shlachim leheter because they can use them in malachton. Guys, these are the rules. Kila shenishmata achas miyarach yisef. You have a kila and one of the legs slipped off, and by the way, the same thing will be with the bench. Asur lishaka. You also letaltala shema yitka. You might fix it. That's another din. Halacha zayin sulam shalaliyam. It's interesting. A ladder is not considered to be a utensil. These big ladders, they are part of the building, and therefore also letaltaloi. Here you go. She'ein arav tadeskeli. People had second stories. There was like a ladder outside the house. That's the way they went up. Avol, the little ladders of a shoybach, could be avol shel shoybach mutal hatoy. So you can lean them here, but don't move them in shoybach l'shoybach. Why? That goes back to Perek Chav Daled. And what? And even more now. Here it's worse. No, here it's a shvuz. Because if you're going to move them properly, you're going to end up doing tzad. You're going to forget that it's Shabbos. Maybe rod that's used to harvest olives. Im yesh olav toiras keli. How does it have a toiras keli, guys? Remember, by a rod, guys, remember the rules. By a rod, a natural rod, only machshava does not designate. You have to do something physical to it, but you did something physical to it. Then it's a malach shalach to le'isr, which is good. Even though you can't move it, let's say the chatzmai, but at least let's say the kufa, let's say the mekaymer. Kana sheiskin abalabais lis besech v'noyel ba. Here also, if yesh all of toiras keli, in yesh of toiras keli means you use it as a door stopper. How do you catch malach to lehet? Halacha ches delish or you'll see it if a door has some sort of hinge still on it, head on it. Afapi she'ein la atatzir she'echina listem by makam muktzah v'nigreres she'noitlem. That will be okay. Gewaldig. V'chein kadokim, v'chein kadokim she'soismen b'hem apirtzo. A partition. A partition that's made to close a breach underneath. V'chein a mat hanigreres. Bisman shekshurim playing by koisel. So you see that what it was made for. Seisman bohem v'nalam bohem. V'im lav ein alam bohem. V'im ha'gvayim ha'aretz no yalam bohem. Wow, there's a lot of details over here. If you remember that sugya was hard sugyas. In other words, a used door has to have either the remnant of a hinge, guys, or it has to be suspended above the ground for it to be clear that it was a remnant of something. Right. Halacha 9, if the door was made out of one board of wood, and now you can remove it, right? It's a piece of board, it's a board. So how do you know that it was designated? If there isn't some sort of doorway or a door step underneath it, which shows that it's muchan l'ne'ilah. If you don't have that, ein alamba. In other words, circumstantial evidence will also be enough for it to be clear that this door was made, this luach was made for a door, and then you can use it. Yes, no alamba. V'chein neged, a bolt. So a bolt can be just a kana, but sometimes they would make this little rounded bulb on top. The rounded bulb made it easier for you to pick it up and to put it down. The bulb is moichiach. It was made as a doorstop, which is good. If this type of bulb, and it's not just a kodesh, only then what happens neged? There are other times that you can move it if it's attached. Even if it's not directly attached, the rope is attached. But if you move the rope, you move this neger, then it's also good. This is a beam that Rambam holds. It's no keli at all. That's a problem. Or you can use it, but when you take it out, you put it in the corner and it looks like just a beam. So when you look at it, it's not nikar that it was designated for. Why? Because it remains here that Rambam writes. That Rambam wrote a beam doesn't have a toida scali, and it's not tied with the rope. So some things, not enough for it to be by you designated or used. It has to be clear on it. It has to be discernible. We learned this with the cover in the ground. If it's not discernible, you can't use it. Another topic. You have a menorah that's made out of separate parts. That's another whole din because Shema Yachzireno b'Shabbos. All right, va'ayin and Perek Chav Beis. Hoya b'Chadakim. If you have grooves, the nideis kabbalas chulias. It looks like it's made out of parts. Im hoyse gedoyla and shtei adayim. Aslan talmei kavdam. Hoya k'tana mizum otel taltala. Guys, I know we were late. I just want you to know that there's a big machlekes. Mahi girsas Rambam. Many people hold it shouldn't contradict the that we learned above, that this whole version has to be changed over here. Let's go back to Allah Yud Beis. Minal shal gabe ho'im. You have a shoe that's on a shoemaker's block. What's the issue over here, my friends? What's a shoemaker's block? It's a keli shemalachtoy le'iser. Keli shemalachtoy le'iser, the Rambam says you can move l'tzoydech b'koymai. So the Rambam says you can take the shoe off it. When you take the shoe off it, you might move it. So what? That's called tzorech mekoymai. Machbei shel balabatim, a clothes press, not from a professional. You can undo it on Shabbos. Avaloi koivshem. Why can't you put it in there? It's called uvda dechoil. However, that's only if it's not professional. But if it's a professional press, lo yiga, because he doesn't allow anyone to use it. Shnei muktzum machmas chesron kis. V'chein gizeit semen. Unprocessed rolls of wool may not be moved because people are makbid on it, because this is like the raw material to make clothing. If you designated it for it to be used as is, that's it, then mutarim. Unprocessed hides, not only if they belong to a balabayis, even if they belong to a professional, because unprocessed hides, even if someone is going to use, they will still be fit to process them. There's no chesed and kiz. Hold on, any filth, all filth, like re'i, feces, v'ki and vomit, soya, v'chayotze behem. So it's disgusting to have it there. That's called the graf shel re'i that we mentioned in the previous chapter. That's called graf shel re'i. Graf shel re'i means a chamber pot. What did they do then? They had no toilets, and people had a back house, but wake up in the middle of the night. So they had a little pot that people would made a glyman, and it's disgusting. And that's just in a mushel. Today in my house, if I have a garbage and it's filled on Shabbos, I can take it out of my kitchen. It's mamish muksa. That's graf shel re'i. Then koifen aleim keli. Why would you even do the tzolges? If you're not in that environment, why do you care? Leave it there. Why would you care? You don't want a child who might go there to get dirty. Fine. So cover it. And we already mentioned in the previous chapter that even though there's an isur of being mevatel a keli mechanai, but that's only if I put a keli under it. So now it's a buses. If I turn it upside down over it, there's not a problem. Roik shalakarka, dorsel if you told me the no, it's because it's graf shel re'i. Even though I know it's going to go into the ground, I'm moving it. The taltlin konoina. You are allowed to move a warming pan because of its ash. What's the ash? The ash is something that's malachlech, graf shel re'i. Even though you also have in a chivrei eitzim, which is not a problem, but there is also this dirty ash. It's not only about disgusting, something that's going to make everything dirty. Now, another rule, but if it happened, or if a person did it, even though they shouldn't have done, like we learned, it's dripping rain from the roof, and the water is dirty. You shouldn't have put a keli to be mekat, but if you did it, might see an oisay. Halacha yudalit shemen shiyos matakas hakoyda. So beisabad b'Shabbos. This is the Rambam l'shitosei, guys. The Rambam has much less restrictions, let's say, on noilet. I'll tell you better. The Rambam really passes like Rab Shimon. The Rambam holds that noilet is mutter. So if you have oil, what did we learn, guys? If you remember, we're going way back to the beginning with the Rambam wrote the first chapters of Hilchos Shabbos that as long as my action was done out of Shabbos, even though the malacha nasis may eleha b'Shabbos mutter to have hana from it. The exception was bishul shemiyachata b'gecholim. So if you put the press on the olives prior to Shabbos, the oil that's coming out on Shabbos, le Rambam who paskins like Rab Shimon that noil is mutter taka mutter. Chen tamara mushkedim amuchanim l'schaira mutter la'achlam b'Shabbos. That's another thing. You designated it l'schaira. Guys, that's a cloud by food. Remember, food does not become muksa. Even though other items, if you designated it l'schaira, it becomes a keli chesra and kiss, not food. You can open up maschil listapik mena b'Shabbos. She'ein shum oichel shum muksa b'Shabbos klal. It's called muchad. There's one exception. If you're drying produce, while they're in the middle of drying, Yakir, they're disgusting. Even though they finish drying on Shabbos, that's already more problematic. Chutz migroigenes v'tzimukim sheba muksa bizman shemeyapshem oisam hoy l'masricha is being time be'en ulachila. In other words, when Shabbos came in, they were muksa. Chavius shenis galsa. You can't drink the water because there's a sakana. Evatiach shenishbera. Even though they may not be eaten, they're still called oichel. And what did we just learn? That oichel can never be muksa. Because it's oichel. Now, obviously, the guy is moving it not to eat it. Doesn't matter. It's usher to eat. But for this, it's called muksa. Not because of this rule that oichel never becomes muksa. Like it wasn't proven to work. Means you're not allowed to carry it, but it's not muksa. Another thing, that also Shabbos because it's mutza machmas isur. And the Rambam said, we learned in the previous chapter, right now there's no isur. Right now there's no isur yakir. But hoyel hukza lebein hashmoshes, it becomes muksa for the whole Shabbos. So we already said that even though it was designated to sell, it was designated to store for the hunger years, I can choose on Shabbos to use from it. But can I clear out a room? That's a whole different topic. I'm not allowed to clear out a room. Also, you have to have a dvar mitzvah. And even by a dvar mitzvah, what will be a dvar mitzvah? You want to make a no area to have more archim or look for beis hamedrash. But even then, remember, there's restrictions. The case of the fan noisoi, right, beginning of a pedic, and only 4 or 5, not more, until you emptied it out, and don't yechabdu karkiyos isholoitze. You may not sweep that. My pedic chafal, come on, should be yarno. But nichnas v'yoitze boy v'oises shul beragel v'chinas v'yitzra. Even though if people are going to walk in and out, you're going to clear out the floor. Not only Michael Adam, but if the food for animals are for animals that are mitzuyin, not that you own them, but they are in the neighborhood. For example, you can carry dried turmes beans, or izim, because izim don't eat it. As a chotza of that grass that goes deep into the ground, that shrub, right? They used for boundaries. The deers are mitzuyin. Deers. Because Michael Yoinim. Bones, Michael Klovin. All klipin, all garinim that are the oil Michael Behema, my mataltal and noise. Oh, the she'edim ru'oyim. You understand? They become muksa. So taka oichel as oichel, but then you have to throw them behind you because you can't throw them in front of you because you'll have an issue moving them. Even though that we paskin that if you did throw them in front of you, now it becomes like a graf shalei, and now you can move. But if you don't make a graf shalei, the tatel and basar tefuach. What happens if you have meat that's spoiled? Meat that's spoiled, chayes eat, no problem. But tatel and basar chay, raw meat, bein moliach, bein tofel, bein moliach, it's royal ma'achalada. Dag moliach is also okay. If it's okay, fish that's spoiled, even a chaya won't eat. So now what's the tatel? Halacha Yud Zayin. Now that you mentioned that if it's something that's matzui, what's not matzui? The shivrei zechuchias. Shivrei zechuchias were eaten by ostriches. That's not matzui. So ein metaltal and shivrei zechuchias, afa b'shemaychal and amois. Nor can you carry twigs from a vine. Chavilas and moiros. What did we learn? We learned these things were used mainly for fuel. Elephants eat them. That's called, it's not matzui. So if you live in India, you have to know, it depends, it can change in your location. Nor can you carry the lulav, even though the Michael Orvim, more than that, maybe even if you have pilim in your neighborhood, maybe since it's not Mitzuyim, maybe it remains muksa. Halacha Yudches. Bundles of straw, bundles of wood. Yakir, fuel, muksa, but im is kilo Michael behema metaltal noise. Vem lave metaltal noise. Chavile sio pua ve'eza ve'koira noise. Bundles of wild hyssop, madder, hyssop, or thyme. If echnisam la'etzim, fuel, then it's muksa. Ein mistapik b'shabbat. If you gather them la'Michael behema mistapik lahem, v'chein ba'aminta, that's mint. Tvegam, rue, and all types of herbs. I want to know, why did you harvest them? Your intent will designate muksa, not muksa. Halacha Yutes, ein gar for Michael lifnei aputam. Don't rake food that was placed in front of an ox that's being fattened for slaughtered. Bein be'eva shel keli, be'eva shel karka. Why? Because no one will eat it. Why not? Because maybe however, let's go animal to animal. Food that was placed in front of a chamoir, you know what? Even if the chamoir ate of it, the shard will eat from it. So now it's still food, Michael behema, to a behema that's matzui, it's not muksa. But if it was placed in front of a shard, you cannot move it and place it in front of a chamoir. Why? Because Shamichael and the shard metunav berirai, the shard who eats, he drools, and other animals won't eat from his drool. And it's so disgusting that even animals don't eat it. And that's why tlai shel dagim is when you hang the fish on those hooks, they become disgusted. However, if you hung meat, it doesn't become disgusting. You're unique. You are allowed to anoint the mace. You are allowed to wash it without moving it. Furthermore, you can remove akadami tachtov because you want the mace to lay on the choil. It's going to keep the mace. It's going to slow down its deterioration. Another law, and claim mekat. You can bring something that's cold or any metal utensil and put it on the belly of a mace in order for the belly not to blow up. You can stop off of the orifices. You are allowed to bound the jaw, not to move the jaw to close, which is normally what we do, but it shouldn't open more. But you can't move it, but you can prevent it from getting worse. And because you can't move a mace, halacha chafalef is, we just quoted on the previous chapter, the Gemara on Shabbos, about Shlomo HaMelech that went into the Beis HaMedrash when David Aviv passed away on Shabbos, and the Rambam paskins that what was allowed to be done to David, the pas or the tina, can be done for any mace. Mace hamutal b'chama. You got a problem now, so you have to move it. Kavanah mace. What do? Maniach olav kikar. Even though the general rule we learned in the previous chapter, if you have davar hasid, davar muter, if the kavan is for the davar hasid, it's asur. By a mace, they were matir, but you have to put a davar muter. You don't want the mace, God forbid, to get burned. Even nothing. Why? Because a person is bowl al mace. However, but don't use that for other hetadim. Fakert, if your kavan is l'davar ha'asad, it remains asur, as we learned in Perek Chav. Hey, halacha Chav Beis Chayimot l'machama. You want to make a building. You want to make a building arai. Remember that whole story how they did it. For any other reason. So this is how you circumvent it. Two people come and they sit on the sides. And then one person decides it's cham milamato. So a cham milamato, so you bring a bed, not lameis, for the person. Maybe mitasa v'yeshiv alel. The other guy brings a mita v'yeshiv alel. Then they decide, that the sun is baking on their heads. Cham milmailo. So each one is going to bring a machatzelis, they're going to bring a mat, and they're going to put it on top of them. So now you have them holding up mats like this. Then they're going to stand up and pick up the bed to hold up the mat. And then they're going to leave. So now they have an oil arai, all the covered amaze. Now, because now machatzel says gageihem samuch izuluzu ushnei kitzosem ala karka mishnei tzidei amaze. Gabaldik. The final halacha of this chapter, halacha of Gimel. What happens if there's a mace that the pasha has a bad odor in the bias? What's the issue? V'nimsa mizbaze bein achayim and vehemis bazen mimenu muter lo hitzia lekarmelis. Wow! And the Rambam doesn't even write tinoi kikar. Why? Because tinoi kikar is needed to move the mace l'tzoyrech hameis. Here you're moving the mace out of the house l'tzoyrech the living. For the living, bigger covet. And that's called Gadol Kavod Abriyos. That what shedoiches loises Shabbat Torah. Ooh, azoy, ain't chachma, ain't funa, ain't das. You rip off shotness of a person and you let him go naked in the street. The loises says not a lav doiraisa. The loises say is that the rabbanan. Why is it calling it a lav of loisasim? That's the big thing. Because if the person is violating a doiraisa, ain't chachma, ain't funa, ain't das. If the issue is muktzah is that it's very strict the rabbanan, but it's the rabbanan. Kavod habriyos, you move it. But if the people can go to another location, then you understand? Oh, but if the people don't have where to go, then you are allowed to move the mace out.